So please, Dr. Alka.
Yeah, good evening all. Sonu, are you able to hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
We all
So
can.
is the screen visible now?
The screen is visible, but your camera is off, I think.
So let it be, I'll continue like that.
All right, as you wish.
Okay, now is it fine?
Yes, yes. Okay, you are in
Okay.
some dark shadow. That's okay.
Yes, yes.
Please
Yeah,
go ahead.
there is. Good evening all. I am presenting my paper on e-education and globalization. In this paper, I will discuss the form of e-education and its effect on learners, quote unquote. The paper tries to understand the connection of e-education with teaching learning process, the challenges and prospects with the globalized world. For a while, we divide basically education into formal and informal education. Education have been the foundation of knowledge and human development. Education defines the roles and awareness of man in society at the basic level of identification, meanings, and definitions. I am leaving them for a while for because there is a paucity of time. And it is also evident to us. Now, we refer that acquisition of knowledge and the teaching learning process has evolved with the development of science and technology. Formal education comprises of literate-based classroom teaching learning process in which an individual attempts to aim for a degree. This process involves various modes of assessment, test, assignment, attendance, projects, presentations, etc. After completion of these, the individual is given grades, percentage, and promoted to the next level of higher class. The process is involved in regular, private, and distance mode of education. Informal education is an informal, literate, and illiterate mode of teaching learning process. This might be a form of education for individuals with severe disabilities who didn't have access to physical infrastructure of education process. This also involves skilled-based teaching learning processes where formal education might not be required at all. As we see, many folk artists, they just pass on their traditional dances, arts, etc. without the help of any formal written textual basis. That means they follow an oral tradition, and this is where I've placed the informal education where we don't require any degree. The distinction between formal and informal education doesn't swipe the connection between literate and illiterate. Education frames the cognitive and overall behavior of human beings. Now, we can categorize the educational identity into these forms. One, who is educated plus illiterate. One, who is educated but illiterate. The third, uneducated but literate in some skills or some dance, some music forms. And the problematic for the underdeveloping countries, where is the fourth category in which individuals who are uneducated and illiterate. And this can be because of any physical deformity, any physical disability, or the lack of infrastructures. Now, the fifth category is also of morally or ethically educated. The norms of education from textbooks have now shifted to electronic forms. The strong impact of 21st century introduced education dependent on information, communication, and technology, famously known as ICT. Globalization as a process imports information within seconds by a click. We had adopted this form of education as accessible, within our reach, and eternally available. The e-education is the new form of education for the 21st century and beyond. It is in contrast to the traditional form of education. It facilitates a completion of course, a degree, or program, both formal and informal mode. That means both formal and informal mode of education can be completed through e-education. E-education can be imparted through online, internet, mobile, and other form of electronically transmission of teaching learning processes. The benefits of e-education is it is flexible, it can be assessed according to our preferred schedule, traveling time and distance is restrained, no location travel is required, the content is widely available, so one can pursue the choice of courses. Discussing the levels of e-education requires technology. The levels of technology are online platforms, online management systems, hardware and software advancements. Basically, e-education is for anyone from anywhere to everyone from everywhere. It also serves the UNESCO's purpose of education for sustainable development. E-education has reformed the vocabulary. New learning concepts like synchronous and asynchronous learning have emerged. Synchronous means online classes. It involves online studies that are conducted with the aid of chat rooms, and it can only happen online. The communication is online, where the fellow students and teachers are in constant touch with each other. The system allows students to ask their teacher questions instantly through instant messaging, whereas, on the other hand, asynchronous learning can be carried out online and offline. The coursework can be delivered by web, email, and message boards that are posted in online forums. Students do not have access to instant messaging through this online forum. Online teaching strongly connects to the learner. In this form, learners category consists of the teachers as well. The learners are the teachers, teacher learner, and the student learner. That means we have two broad category of learners, where the teacher is also the learner and the student is also the learner. The benefit is that it imparts new skills, development, progress, learning for ourselves, content generation. The student learner interacts virtually, discusses and performs other related activities. The most important is that experiences form a major portion of these categories of learners. I have quoted a site that is www.mhrd.gov.in that gives us a wide array of online platforms for education. That is for school level and for higher education level. It also gives us an access to libraries. Now, we see that education is at the center of at the process of globalization. Every nation has an educational identity, and the carrier of these is a self, that is an individual, an agent. The agent becomes the center for globalization, education, socialization, and identification. That means with the process of education, socialization, and globalization and identification becomes a significant activity. It was Aristotle who basically at the fundamental level defined knowledge. He defined knowledge in terms of understanding, categories, and ethics. What are the problems of education? That is, at the outer level, we see so many injustices, discriminations. How to deal with this? that is how to deal with rational decision makings so that all these discriminations are avoided, which we say that only education can make us to decide rationally. But the conflict is that we have misinformations in the era of strong informations. There are intellectual properties, there are people, there are self, and the self consists of mind and body both, where we say that globalization impacts educational identity. That is, there should be a designing of social systems that which is continuous. The structure of the social world is to be based on educational identity. Communication should be stronger. We need to recognize and cognitize. And of course, that when we talk about education, which is directly linked with knowledge, we have to admit the forms of epistemology and consciousness. There is a philosophy of exchange between values of different educational groups within a society. Inherent openness of one form of education is exposed to the education of other. Ethnic movements, human rights, and minority rights movements and cultural movements have been said to give rise to the educational relations. Politics also gives impetus to cultural rationality, since ethnic voters and liberal voters with minority rights become valuable as the process of globalization proceeds. Hence, discovering the new means and form of e-education is increased. As a result, social and economic benefits are also gained. Emphasis
Excuse
is
me.
on educational preservation, documentation. Hello?
Excuse me. It's a
Hello?
lost. It's excuse me. It's a last 2 minutes.
Yes, yes, please, sir. I'll just take 2 minutes only. Yes,
Okay.
thank you so much. Yeah. Thank
Thank
you so
you.
much. I'll just take 2 minutes. Emphasis should be on educational preservation, documentation, promotion of cultural interculturalism, understanding, acceptance, awareness, appreciation. That means basically, globalization was an advent of 1960s, and after that, what has happened is that it has raised fundamental questions to the notion of educational relations and educational identity. The present century is literally different from whatever it was, in the previous centuries. And indeed, we have more knowledge, more information. It is still at the center, but there are other factors also. There is homogenization that is taking place in several aspects of life of people due to globalization. But this process also accelerates the growth of educational consciousness. The development of educational relations in process of globalization is a complicated convergence of social, political, psychological, and philosophical processes. I'm just leaving the definitions where we describe globalization in terms of, as short as described, internationalization, westernization, liberalization, all those things that which has also impacted education. Now, the basic question is that how do we begin from here, right? The dimensions of globalization that I'm leaving. We need to, as globalization reformed and transformed the means of education, or has education transformed itself to meet the requirements of globalization? We say it is a two-way process that has mutually met the requirements of universal form of education. The relationship between educator and educating has been advanced by the alternative means available for education. So we have a new beginning in front of us, that is e-education, that has now become omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. That means that which is present everywhere, that which is all powerful, and that which imparts the knowledge about everything. Now, the advances are there is content uploading, there is development of new and accessible tools. We have to overcome gender boundaries. We have to overcome class, color, creed, caste discrimination, which e-education is successful. So what do we mean is that e-education and globalization are of both holistic and all inclusive in nature. Thank you so much for your patient listening. I stop my presentation here.
Thank you. Very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you very much.